In a story that confirms every single thing you've long known but that they assured you wasn't true at all, dozens of people, including CEOs and two prominent... In a story that confirms every single thing you've long known but that they assured you wasn't true at all, dozens of people, including CEOs and two prominent actresses, have been caught up in a massive cheating and bribery scandal involving admissions to the nation's top colleges. There's a very narrow road to affluence and prominence in this country. They control the gates to it. They're excluding you and letting themselves in. Trace Gallagher has more on this amazing story.
Tucker, the feds say Operation Varsity Blues began in 2011 and ended last month, where 33 parents so far paid anywhere from $200,000 to $6.5 million to get their kids into an elite college. Court records say the parents paid the money to a college and career advisor named William Singer. And Singer, who has already pled guilty, would in turn funnel the money to coaches and college administrators to make kids look like star athletes. Singer also bribed testing centers to alter SAT and ACT scores, or hired proctors to sit with students while they took the tests. Here's a prosecutor. Watch.
There can be no separate college admission system for the wealthy, and I'll add that there will not be a separate criminal justice system either.
Along with prominent law and business professionals, actresses Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman have also been charged. The FBI says Loughlin and her fashion designer husband, Massimo Giannulli, paid $500,000 to have their two daughters recruited to the University of Southern California's crew team, even though the girls had never rowed. And actress Felicity Huffman allegedly paid $15,000 to boost her daughter's SAT score, and indeed it went up 400 points. A judge has now released Hoffman on $250,000 bond. Her husband, the actor William H. Macy, has not been charged. Many of the suspects are now cooperating, including the former Yale women's soccer coach who was paid $400,000 for recruiting a girl who never played competitive soccer. When she got into Yale, her parents paid William Singer an additional $1.5 million. Tucker.
My mind is blown. Trace Gallagher, thank you. Patrick Deneen is exactly the person we wanted to talk to tonight. He's a political science professor at Notre Dame, and he joins us tonight. Professor, thanks very much for coming on. It sounds like it's not really a meritocracy.
Well, it's a meritocracy that is now taking on all of the features of the old aristocracy. In other words, it's able to perpetuate itself from one generation to the next, which is, at least in theory, what the meritocracy came into being to get rid of. And so what we have now is a new version of the old aristocracy.
What I'm confused by is why it took a police sting to unearth this information. Colleges are supported, heavily supported, wouldn't exist in many cases without federal subsidies, either directly or through federally backed student loans. So why isn't the admissions process transparent?
Well, the admissions process has always had features to it that invite gaming, I think we could call it. And I think what we saw today is really just the logical extension of long-standing gaming, most of which, in fact, probably the lion's share of which is entirely legal, but it involves assisting your children in taking the standardized tests and enrolling them in enrichment camps and all kinds of service opportunities that end up padding resumes. And for some parents, moving into school districts where your public school education is going to get you certain advantages. So we have had a system that has invited this kind of gaming, and I think what we saw today is really just the logical extension of this into illegality. But let's face it, this is simply a manifestation of what's already been the case. The wealthy and the powerful are able to game the system and ensure that their children have advantages that most Americans' children do not have.
They're also the same ones who are very apt to lecture everyone else about diversity and the need for diversity in higher education. That was not a diverse group, from what I can tell. I sense there's a connection there.
I think there's a deep connection. In fact, as it's become more and more difficult for most families to have students admitted to these, like, let's say, increasingly this narrow path to success and achievement in American society, at the very same time, we've seen these institutions become these centers of claims of egalitarianism and of wokeness, to use the term of art. When I taught at Princeton a number of years ago, I had an article from the New York Times on my door. It was interviewed a dean of students about the selectivity of eating clubs on campus, kind of their version of fraternities. And the dean of students stated, without self-consciousness, she stated there is no place for selectivity and elitism on the Princeton campus. This is the kind of viewpoint that it's the kind of viewpoint one encounters at these kinds of institutions where everyone believes they are the very portrait of egalitarianism and are completely unaware, in some ways, of how profoundly elite and selective they in fact are.
Do you think they really believe that, or are they just projecting? They sort of know how rotten and corrupt the system is, and that spurs them to attack everyone else as rotten and corrupt?
I think it's probably a bit of a mix. There's certainly awareness of how difficult it is to get into these kinds of institutions. But I think there's also a kind of deep, almost self-deception that takes place as soon as you're a part of this ruling class. Since in a democracy, it's unacceptable to be a kind of aristocrat, these institutions cry and decry and denounce any form of inequality except the very one that perpetuates this elite class that occupies these institutions.
Exactly. Professor Deneen, one of the few professors I really respect. Thanks a lot for coming on tonight. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.